very much. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So we're going to brush up on differential equations and...
Oh, great. Yeah.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about my background, and the purpose of this is really to share experiences and battle wounds from having been part of two companies in robotics, which in the recent, I guess, few months or so, maybe a year or so, it's been in headlines almost on a daily basis. But when I started doing this about 2 decades ago, that was definitely not the case. When I used to go talk to the VCs in the Sand Hill Road about robotics 15 years ago, they would almost immediately throw me out of their office. But it's changed a lot today. So I'll start by giving a very quick overview of the field in terms of the applications, and it's going to be primarily focused on consumer robotics. And then I'll talk about my experiences at Evolution Robotics, building a company from ground up, going through many phases of changes and pivots, as they call them, until we found success. And I'll at the very end briefly talk about the company we just founded a few months ago, Embodied, which is actually in this building at Cross Campus. So one of the most popular robotic products, by the way, what happened to the clicker? It's okay, I can manage without it. It's not. Oh, there it is. Thank you very much. So Roomba is one of the probably most popular consumer robotic products that you have seen. There's been more than, I think by now, about 15 million units of this product being sold annually, about 2.5, 3 million, and there are other robotic vacuum cleaners that are coming to market. The latest version of Roomba actually, you would be surprised, has a camera on it and a bunch of other sensors, and it builds a map of your home and knows exactly what the layout looks like, and will clean one room after the other. Whoa. So you're being watched. Other applications which has yet not taken off in US, but in Europe it has, is robotic lawn mowing, and you can see sort of taking care of things that require regular maintenance is where robotics in the consumer space is taking off. But also going to agriculture, not many people realize John Deere has more than 100,000 robots in the field actually driving autonomously and doing things like harvesting, while the farm is sitting in the cabin here and trading the crop for the best price. Robotic surgery, this is one of the most successful robotics companies to date, is Intuitive Surgical with a Da Vinci robot that actually performs certain types of surgery. It's a company that's worth more than $20 billion. Of course, drones has been in the news for the last few years. Many companies have come, and now many companies are going because they've overpromised and there was a bubble. And there's a few of them that survive right now in the drone space, which is mostly about videography and so on. In the consumer space, DJI is the one that's winning, and everyone else that was chasing that seems to be losing. And a lot of people are shifting focus to actually building real robots, flying robots, which actually fly autonomously rather than remote controlled devices. And so there's a new wave of robotics companies coming in that space. Another space that's been very successful is automating of the warehouse, where you have all these packages that have to be moved. Amazon ships God knows how many million packages per day, and now you have companies like Kiva Systems that Amazon acquired for almost $1 billion a few years ago that is automatically moving the packages around. The last bit of it is actually picking up the package from a shelf and putting it in a box and putting a label on it is being done by humans right now, but believe me, Amazon is working on that too. And of course, self-driving cars has been in the news many years. I used to, in the last 15 years or so, every time I gave a talk publicly, I would say the car will be the ultimate robot of this century. I was right, but I was surprised how fast it happens, because it's unbelievably complex in terms of technologies that have to go into making these things actually work. So, coming back to me, I've been doing consumer robotics for 15 years actually, since 2001. Actually, November of 2001. So exactly 15 years ago. And I started, when I first moved to the US, I was teaching AI at USC and then moved to JPL working on the Mars rovers. And I got contacted by Bill Gross, which is just around the corner, Idea Lab. And he said, we are building this robotics company called Evolution Robotics, and would love to have you join us to run our technology. And my immediate reaction was, you must be crazy. And we sat down and talked for almost 6 months, and the goal of the company was to become the Microsoft of robotics. That was Bill's grand vision for the company. I felt it was not necessarily the right goal, but Bill himself was a very interesting person, and I thought I'll learn a lot about our entrepreneurship. So I joined the company as a CTO. And I'll talk about the phases we have gone through. Short version of the story is that we started in 2001. By 2008, we had spent $40 million developing really breakthrough technologies, but on the business side, we were not gaining traction because the vision of being software platform for an industry that didn't exist was the disparity, which is why it took me 6 months to convince myself to join the company. So we spun it out. In 2008, we reset the company, spun it out. We took the core technology, started from scratch again, and built our own product, which is one of the products is this, Mint. It's a robotic floor cleaner and uses indoor navigation system and all these things. And we launched the product in 2010, grew very rapidly, and got acquired by iRobot in 2012. So I'll go through the steps we went through. 2001 to 2005, I would call that as the sort of first block of time we spent on it, which was to become Microsoft of robotics. So the plan was to build a software platform. And as I mentioned, back then, and which is still true today, we did not have a standard hardware platform, right? Still today, we don't have a generic platform for robotics. This robot will perform any task in your home. So we had to build our own hardware. This was our first version. So we took a PC, slapped it on a hardware device robot, and said this is going to be a robot that hobbyists and so on will develop products for. We developed a software platform that allowed you to use very simple UI to program the robot to do different tasks. We got a lot of attention, but not many sales. The main focus was developing this software platform, which was you could call it a stack or SDK that had a lot of the underlying core technologies that allowed robots to be intelligent. Things such as abstraction layer to the hardware, but then the hard part, things like how does the robot know how to get around the environment? Actually, for those that are not familiar with the field, would say, well, why would that be hard? But it's hard, I can guarantee you that. Today we don't have time to get into that. And many hundreds of Ph.D.s and so on have been written on it. We eventually solved that problem, and now the latest Roomba, for instance, it knows exactly where it is in your home. Computer vision, back then, 2001, right, with the limited computing, how do you recognize objects in the environment? How do you even recognize an obstacle, right? You're walking, moving around, you need to, first of all, be safe. So we developed all of these technologies, and the plan was to go license it to third parties and let them build products. We actually worked really hard, traveled all over the world, and licensed pieces of this platform to companies such as Sony. So if those who are as old as I am will recognize the Sony iRobot, which is a robotic dog. It's a companion pet robot, which actually was extremely successful. They generated about $150 million of revenue for that product. And this was a robotic pet for entertainment and companionship in the home. Especially in the Japanese home where people don't want to disturb their neighbors. They're very courteous to their neighbors and so on. The homes are small and they don't want to be loud. So having a pet that can be controlled, you can turn it off whenever you want. It doesn't poop or pee in the common area and all these things, so it made a lot of sense. We developed a vision system, which was a camera system that was recognizing objects in the environment, interacting with people, even recognizing the charging station. This is the charging station, which is like the nest for the robot. It would go and sit on the nest and recharge itself. So we licensed it to that company. We licensed, so when Roomba came out in 2002, I believe, they had a success right out of the gate. At least it looked like a success back then. The robot was priced at $199, so everyone else, one of the main sales channels was Sharper Image. Do you remember Sharper Image? They used to have them in the different malls. We went and licensed some core technology to them for competing with their own customer, which was Roomba, right? They were selling a bunch of Roombas, they realized the success, okay, let's go beat them. And we developed this product. The product was actually pretty good, but then Sharper Image went out of business. So we couldn't control that. We actually took the same vision technology that was doing recognition here. Back then, where we didn't have smartphones, we had these things that were called feature phones for those that are younger than me. And we were actually doing mobile marketing. So the same vision technology, you could take it with your cell phone, take a picture of a location, an ad in magazine, and so on, and it would recognize it and it would push advertisement to. We launched it with Vodafone and KDDI for doing marketing. We had other toy companies that licensed our technology and so on. So we looked good, right? People are actually buying our technology to develop it. But obviously for each of these verticals, we had to spend a lot of resources in customizing the technology to them. And the lessons learned is that many of these products actually failed for reasons that we could not control. Sharp Image went out of business. KDDI and Vodafone, at the time, feature phones were too complex to work, so this service we had provided was embedded like several layers in a menu, so you had to go to the menu and select it, and many people don't do it. They say on cell phones, for every click you lose 50% of the audience, so imagine if you have 5 or 6 clicks, you have lost majority of the audience. So one of the key lessons learned in this business model was, if the market is not mature enough, where you have potentially thousands of potential customers, it's a very unstable business model to try to license to third parties. Because in my experience, chances of success for consumer products is maybe at best 1 out of 10. Meaning that if you have 10 customers, 90% of them are going to fall out. You have 1 customer, right? The other thing that was very hard is that we had to customize the solutions for every customer. It takes significant resources. How many customers can you support, even if the market was mature, right? Let's say. So there's a number of key challenges from this. The key learning for me was you don't control your own destiny. In a startup that is to license technology to third parties, unless there is a standard and unless there is a mature ecosystem, it's really hard to make a business work that way. So we decided, one of the challenges, by the way, was a lot of these technologies we were developing required very, as I said, customization, but also required a lot of computation. So imagine if we wanted to make it a generic solution, we would have to take our vision system, implement it on a PC, and hand it over to a third party and say, okay, now you go integrate it with your product, because the PC is standard, right? But the PC costs a ton of money. One of the key challenges here was cost. How can you give me this vision system that's like state of the art? We have about 100 patents, by the way, on this technology. So this was like breaking, leading edge of technology. So we would go to companies, and one of my I was a technologist, sort of gradually turning into an entrepreneur and businessman. Go sit there excited, talking about this technology, thinking people are going to get blown away and say, oh, this is fantastic. So can you implement it on a like $5 processor? And I fell out of the seat a few times, and gradually actually we got there, but that was one of the key challenges. So we said, you know what? This is too complex. Let's move up the value chain and deliver the hardware too. So we will package this into hardware. So we give them a black box module, which becomes much easier to implement and integrate into the product. So we went from just doing software to saying, okay, we're going to provide embedded components. We're going to make sure it fits into low cost. It's modular, it's plug and play, so it becomes much easier for third parties to adopt our technology and roll it out into the product. And we position ourselves really well in terms of price performance, extreme high performance and extremely low cost, by orders of magnitude compared to comparable technologies. For instance, at the time, one of the core technologies we had is known as VSLAM, Visual Simultaneous Localization and Mapping, which is this technology that using a camera can build a map of the environment and know exactly where it is, right? And the state of the art was, at the time, Carnegie Mellon University, Sebastian Thrun, whom many people may know from the autonomous self-driving cars, he was the guy that started Google X and started the self-driving movement, basically. He had the first SLAM implementation, which was using a $10,000 sensor and equivalent amount of computing to do localization in a corridor of a university. So a order of magnitude, $20,000 solution versus VSLAM, which was in the order of tens of dollars, was really, that's what we had developed. So we had VSLAM, we had Viper. VSLAM at the time was in the order of like $30, $40, and we realized that the market needs like a sub $10 solution. And after not sleeping for 6 months, I came up with a solution that was called Northstar, which worked like an indoor GPS, and I'll talk about it briefly. And this is one of the things I learned, right? So sort of the key 3 lessons we learned from it, that there are 3 things that matter in consumer robotics. And number 1 is cost. Number 2 is cost. Number 3 is cost. And for those who have worked with technologies that are complex in terms of perception and decision making and algorithms and so on, imagine doing things like recognizing where you are in the environment, right? Or imagine reliably recognizing every obstacle around you. Like understanding there's a ledge here, there's a pole there, there's a couch there, there's a book on the floor. If you're driving around, you need to know all of these things, otherwise you're going to constantly get into trouble. Imagine doing that, but for $4 or $5, right? It just makes it so much harder. I used to work at NASA JPL, where it was extremely challenging to build robots to send to Mars, but I gained an appreciation for challenge when I sort of went in the consumer domain, because there at least we had unlimited budgets, right? Here, you don't have unlimited, so the budget is extremely constrained. Plus, it has to work in millions of homes you have never seen. Meaning you cannot obviously do exhaustive testing to know what's going to work or not, right? And one of the challenges of robotics is that it has to interact with the real world, which is extremely complex to describe. There is no simulation rich enough that can describe the world. So you can't really simulate your way into it. As an example of cost, so if you're retailing a product at $199, the price you pay to pick up the product from Best Buy to take it home, that means the landed cost of the product cannot be north of $50 for you to have a successful business model, right? Let's say, so it's $200 retail. It is your cost, which includes the bill of materials of the product, the manufacturer's overhead. The manufacturer will put a margin on top of it, right? The packaging cost, the shipping, customs, storage, and everything. If it costs more than $50, you don't have a profitable business model, because the retailer, basically when you put it in retail, they'll take 40 to 50% of that as margin. So that means they're buying it from you for about $100, right? And then you have to have some allowance for returns, especially in the US. In the US, you can buy the product, and whenever you decide, you can go back and say, I didn't like it. So the retailer doesn't eat that day. You get truckloads of them back to you, and sometimes you open the box and there's a brick in there, not the product, and the retailer doesn't care. So imagine it's a $50 cost, and out of that, if you're really generous, you have $30 bill of materials for the robotics part, and this is motors, batteries, processors, sensors, and everything else that goes with it, right? So that sort of gives you a constraint problem that's really hard. So we had to come up with a cheaper solution for navigation, which was this Northstar idea, which was the idea of constrain the problem, so having a way to localize relative to some reference point in the environment rather than no reference point, which was VSLAM. So we came up with Northstar, which was the idea was you would plug in this beacon into the outlet, and it would project spots onto the ceiling that act as reference points like GPS. And we had a proprietary sensor on this robot that would look at those triangulates like GPS and figure out where you are. Obviously, in theory, it sounds good, right? But first, we have to build this for like couple of dollar cost. Secondly, what happens when the robot is under the couch or the bed and all these things. And what happens when all of your outlets are typically behind the sofa? So we had to work on all these things, and we did. And we went through several generations of the system, from the first to the second to the fourth to the fifth, and you can see here actually the way the sensor was implemented was you could use a camera, but that costs a lot of money. Cameras are like $2. So we came up with a different solution, which was using photodiodes. These are photo detectors that basically count the number of photons that hit the surface on a pyramid. So it's a pyramid like that, plastic part, 2-cent part. And each of these parts are about 7-8 cents each, the photodiodes. And then you have a tiny processor here with some glue logic. Basically what happens, it acts like a sundial. And so what you see is the reflection of the light from these two spots on the ceiling. You measure the reflection, and you can measure the directionality to that light, and then you can triangulate and figure out the position of the robot very accurately. Of course, it's easy for me to say, but we had an army of really smart people that implemented all the algorithms to figure out how do you know the difference between that and all of these spotlights here, for instance, or your ambient light and all these things. So we would modulate the signal at certain frequencies, different frequencies, and be able to detect that. And we came up with a bunch of products, and we went and started actually selling this to companies. So this is a Kenmore robotic vacuum cleaner using Northstar. We actually had a Hoover equivalent. We came up with a very cool games. You guys, some of you may have seen Anki, which is this robotic race cars that can race against, and they're racing against you. About 10 years ago, we came up with an idea with Northstar that did not require a mat. You can actually drive them around anywhere, and they would race and chase you. And Rovio was a telepresence robot using Northstar, and then we came up with this Swiffer bot concept, so a robot that will Swiffer your floors. Well, given time constraint, I can't really go into a lot of details. We did a lot of these things, and one of the key lessons learned again, you don't control your own destiny. So a lot of these products actually didn't succeed for various reasons. Many of them were launched, but for instance, the marketing didn't work out, the production of quality of the product wasn't right, and all this things. So one of the things I learned is that no one is gonna be as married to your technology as you are. For them, for Hoover to have a successful robotic vacuum launch is not a do or die. For me, it is, right? So they will never pay as much attention to its success. The latest one we did was this Swiffer bot, which was for P&G. We actually licensed it to them. I gave them an 8-week license for a lot of money up front, actually, right? And every time I would go to Cincinnati to meet with them, I see there are 10 more people sitting around the table. And I started seeing the same pattern. I said, okay, this is going to take 5 years, and then they're going to launch it, and it's not going to be successful. So I told them, guys, I'm pulling my license back. I'm paying your money. We're going to go take this product to production, and then we'll meet again. So a short version of the story, we went and built our own product, which was the Swiffer bot, which eventually became that. So the design and everything. The Northstar beacon became a battery-driven one. You can put it on a shelf, so it doesn't need to be behind a sofa. It was battery-driven, so you don't need to plug it in. The robot will automatically turn it on and off. Beautiful design. Spent about $1.2 million on the design by Yves Behar. And then figured out how to do manufacturing. Actually, my head of manufacturing, Lillian, is right there. And then I had hair back then. We got it into retail, which all of these things are challenges on their own, of course. Yes, we started shipping, and this is interesting. So we had it in 1,000 retail stores and Amazon. So Bed Bath & Beyond and Amazon were our launch partners. And then we were looking at the numbers every week, like how many units have we sold this week? Looking at the numbers, and they're like not moving. Like, oh shit. 1,000 stores, we thought, okay, one per store per week, that should be pretty good, right? Like, we get the report, okay, we sold 20 this week. Oh my God. Next week, we sold 21. Third week, 25. And then we turned on our TV advertisements here. And then, boom, we went off. We were selling 4,000 or 5,000 units a week, and we ran out of inventory. Which was good. right? We sold out of inventory. It was the hottest product in the market, and then everyone in the industry heard about it. And next year, we went from 1,000 retail doors to about 7,000, right? We got Walmart and you name it. And then, of course, iRobot came knocking on the door and said, we want to join the companies, and we did. So we joined forces. So, spare you for all of that. We'll spare you for the technologies. There's been a lot of interesting things happening in the field now. It's moved by leaps and bounds, and there are new opportunities that have been created. There's a lot of investments going into robotics, and there's also exits, which is exciting the investment community to actually invest, which has led us to Embodied, which is our current company. And the premise of the company was, okay, this was fine. I never expected when I left JPL to join Idea Lab with Bill Gross and then go do what I did. I'd never expected that we would be a floor care company. The glory of robotics. So at iRobot, a lot of interesting things are happening there, and I think evolution has had its fingerprints all over the place. And if you go look at their product portfolio, you will see all of the robots are now mapping, and there's connectivity and cloud and all these things, which is great. Their stock went, I'll take credit for part of it. When they bought us, they were $16. Today, they're at $51, I think. And that was great, but I wanted to do something more interesting, because with the confluence of technologies in 3D and vision and voice recognition and so on, we think time has come for personal robots at home. And the other premise is that I believe robots can do good and do things that are much greater than just cleaning the floor. That's the premise of the company. So we are working on developing lifelike robots that are going to be companion to us and our families and take care of us. We are in stealth mode, so I can't say much more. The other thing I can say is I partnered up with Maya Mataric, who's a professor and dean of neuroscience and computer science at USC, who is the first person I worked with when I first moved to the US. So 17 years later, we connected and started this company. And this week, actually, we announced we raised money with Intel and Amazon backing us. So we are very excited. We are in this building, and we are hiring. So if you know people with strong background in these areas, so product management in consumer space, and also software, anything software, complex software, computer vision, natural language processing, and all these things, we are looking. So thank you. Sorry to rush you through this, but I hope you got a couple of things from this presentation.
Excellent presentation. Very nice. I love it. Lots of detail. That was like possibly, if you had gone through all the slides, like an hour-long entertainment section, which is great. I'm fascinated by the realm of robotics and all that stuff, because I think it can really help me like just be more lazy as a human being, just like not do anything except just, look at Facebook and dislike things. Or frown at them, whatever. I love those frown buttons now. But no, it's really educational. It's really interesting to see the evolution of your own career within robotics and the struggles and the hardships that you've invariably experienced. And we could all relate to that, and I think that's just really cool. And congratulations on your recent success.
Thank you.
I'm really looking forward to hearing more, but I know you guys are in stealth mode. But also cross-campus guy right over here, right next door. So I think it's really cool that we have an entrepreneur, founder, CEO of a new company that's all here in Pasadena. That's really great. So we're going to open up to Q&A now. John's going to walk around with the mic. If you have a question, raise your hand. We'll get it answered. Please save comments and stories for offline. Paolo, will you be hanging out a little bit afterwards?
Absolutely.
Okay, so if you guys want to share stories about robotics and JPL and nerdy stuff, which I'm sure you guys all do, which is great, please save that for afterwards. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. I got to work my way back here. But in the meantime, this is obviously very disruptive technology. What about all the potential people that might be put out of work, if you become more successful?
That's a great question, and as a matter of fact, the philosophy of our company, I'm sorry to disappoint you, we are not going to build robots that do your work for you. We are actually a believer that robots should be companions to help you do work for yourself and motivate you. So for instance, one of the areas that's interesting is elderly care, right? And every roboticist you talk to, they will say the killer app for robotics is take care of elderly, because we know that's a looming problem. We want to take care of our baby boomer generation that's getting into retirement to live independently in their own home. So robots should come and do everything for them in the home, right? And that's exactly what's going to take to make sure they die faster. Because you're taking away the motivation and the drive that it takes to keep a healthy living. So our purpose is to have robots that are going to motivate you and coach you to do your own work, to accomplish the best you can with your capabilities, right? That's our philosophy. So we don't want to have task bots that are going to automate your home. Yeah. But we're going to build robots that can smoke on your behalf, drink on your behalf.
Exercise.
He's a personal
I heard
trainer.
the Japanese are also building robots, as boyfriend girlfriends, right?
Yeah, actually, that's true.
Hi there. I'm interested on your take on the singularity. When robots, or if robots get to an advanced enough state where they're comparable to humans.
Yeah, it feels like it, right? It feels like singularity is actually near. As I mentioned, one of the things I mentioned earlier was the self-driving cars. It's extremely complex, and I thought it's going to take us another 30, 40, 50 years to get there, to get where we are today. But it happened much faster. And now with the advancement of AI, which is fed by the amount of data we have access to today, which we never had before, we are solving problems that have been decade-long problems, like voice recognition at a far field, what Amazon Alexa does, right? Something a lot of us have worked on and failed, and it required a paradigm shift. And Amazon solved that problem by using data and deep learning, right? So it feels like things are accelerating at a rapid pace. And obviously, when things move that fast, it's extremely hard to predict them. It's hard enough to predict when it's linear, extremely hard when it's non-linear. And it feels like it's pretty non-linear now. So at the risk of being wrong, I would say this. I still think there's a ton of very hard, challenging problems in robotics, right? And I do feel this burst that we are seeing right now, mostly enabled by deep learning, has a glass ceiling we will hit, and then we have to go through another phase. And then the other perspective is the mechanical side, right? So one thing is doing things on silicon, which is benefiting from Moore's law and still today. It's something completely different to do things in the physical world, right? And that's what robotics is about. And we don't have anything even close to equivalent to Moore's law yet. So things are not developing as a rapid space. We can pack more and more transistors on a small space, but with mechanics, it's mechanics so far, although I do believe there are potential technologies that could disrupt that. If we can use electroactive polymers or shape memory alloys, which actually put muscle into the same space of silicon, then potentially we can see rapid growth in that area too. But that's the bottleneck, in my opinion, right now, in terms of building capable robots that can do the things that we do without even thinking about it.
I had read somewhere at some point in the book that the technology that Xbox used for their like facial recognition, people recognition, video games, that had some impact in moving ahead technology in that space. It helped push down costs and stuff. Did you feel any of that in your related fields?
No, I think there's a lot has happened. My own background is actually, academic background is computer vision and robotics. And computer vision has come a long way. But we have gone through, I think, 2 paradigm shifts. The first paradigm shift compared to what was happening before is that what was happening before just didn't work. Right? You would do a lab demo, elaborate, you would control the lighting, put curtains every time your program manager came, and you would show a demo, and it may have worked sometimes, but most of the time it wouldn't. And we moved to a paradigm shift where the paradigm completely changed the way we were doing things. For those that are familiar with the field, is the feature-based approaches, like sift features and surf features and all these things, and we started making things work. Like the vision system I talked about, that was one of the first actual algorithms that actually worked in recognizing things reliably. Whether you have actually put your hand on the page that you're trying to recognize and you still recognize it. So I've started getting And a lot of work went into that, by the way, and especially when we had to scale it down in computing and scaling it up in terms of the size of database we can recognize against. Many, tens of years, man years went into developing that solution to make it work. And that was just disrupted in the last year or so with machine learning, right? So you get a freshman from university, give him a laptop, and they'll do it, right? They'll go to use TensorFlow from Google and image database and just put it together within a month. They will have object recognition better than what we spent tens of years to develop, right? The same thing is happening in self-driving cars, right? You had Sebastian Thrun, as I mentioned, who started the whole movement of self-driving cars. The approach that Google is taking, which is very math-based and a lot of algorithms calculating and analyzing images and all these things. And then you get a guy out of the garage that builds a company that gets bought for a few $1 billion by Amazon in a matter of months. The world is changing very rapidly in that space.
Over here, next question.
Hi, I have a question just with regards if you could comment on, particularly with the aging population. I know Japan's been very interested in robotics, and I know Medicare in particular is actually trying to explore a lot of options for taking care of the aging populations, and so we'll be peaking in the next couple decades. Curious if you had any comments on whether you feel robotics is going to go that direction in terms of really booming and taking off, because money's definitely there.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, that's, as I mentioned earlier, every roboticist you talk to, they'll say that's the killer app for robotics, like taking care of the aging population. And I told you about our philosophy at Embodied, which is not to do the tasks for them, but motivate them and coach them to do their own tasks, because that drive will give them more longevity and quality of life. At the same time, there is room for task bots that will do things for them, for people that basically cannot do maybe your laundry, maybe even help you get out of bed, change your clothes and all these things. And that's where robotics right now, in my opinion, is currently lacking. The missing link of robotics is that physical interaction, which we call manipulation, right? So imagine grabbing someone, maybe potentially fragile, lifting them out of bed, helping them hold their hand, take them to the bathroom, help them take off their clothes. Now imagine this cloth we are talking about, right? Very soft object that can take many shapes. Figuring out how to manipulate that, fold it, put it inside the drawer. Extremely challenging, both from a hardware perspective, but also software. So that's where it's hard. I think the first wave is gonna be sort of computing in your home. The IoT space probably is gonna help with the elderly and aging population first.
I have two questions. First one is, what do you think of the recent development, I think it was this month, in quantum computing that they claim puts the power of China's fastest supercomputer on a chip? And then the second question is, what do you think of the show Black Mirror on Netflix?
I haven't seen the show, and I don't know much about quantum computing other than the basic principles of it. I was talking to one of my friends that's at Caltech doing research in that area, and the sense I'm getting is, I'm not an expert by any means, but the sense I'm getting from the experts is that theoretical right now, I don't know when it will be true, like us being able to implement that, because being able to swap quantums still requires massive facilities, right? Doing it on a chip this big, I don't know.
Over here.
Obviously, you can create a robot that will take care of helping someone to the bathroom. And you can build all the software to do that. Some problems that you're going to bump into are easier if you just have the hardware of the robotic frame driven by someone who's an operator and some way of doing that. Have you contemplated using the machine learning algorithms to learn, say for example, the elderly person's child's personality, how they talk to them, how they care for them for those times when the child is too busy building robots?
Yes. Point well taken. Yes, we are actually, Embodied is doing a lot of that, but it's pretty early on. And you brought up two good points. One is the sort of crowdsourcing and sort of teleoperating things, right? But using remote labor to do something locally. And it's a pretty interesting business model, and there are some companies that are doing that. There's a company in Pittsburgh that's doing that for basically transportation of goods, food, laundry, and so on in hospitals, where they have a data center or control center where when the robot gets into trouble, it will call back and someone will take manual control and drive it around to avoid that problem. The personality one and so on definitely is very interesting, and I think this is one of the core areas of focus for us at Embodied, because we do believe that the man-machine interface is going through a transformation, and adding personality and emotion and empathy are kind of things that we need to start adding to these devices. And so I think the Amazon Echo is already opening our eyes up for that the interfaces are going to change. When you don't deal with a keyboard and a screen anymore, what is the right interface? If self-driving cars are going to actually be self-driving, where you're sitting there and there's no steering wheel, how can I make the passenger comfortable about what's going on around them?
One last question.
Hey, Paolo. So two quick questions, actually. Can you talk about similarities and differences between creating a floor cleaning robot at a company the scale of Evolution versus iRobot? And the second question is, can you talk about similarities and differences between a consumer-facing product that interacts with the world versus with a person?
Yes, very good question. So the differences between sort of building a consumer product in Evolution versus iRobot, which I went through that transition, was interesting. Let's see where to start. I learned that culture matters a lot, right? And so in a startup environment, if you have the right culture and a high-performing team, you can overcome any obstacle. If you hire smart people and just inspire them to accomplish your goal, they will overcome any obstacle. I feel that was the culture we had at Evolution. For instance, I would never ask anyone in the company that you got to go to China and deal with this manufacturing issue, right? They would just come to me and say, Paolo, we are going to China and we'll be back when we are back, all right? Or they would tell me, you got to go with us, all right, I'll go with you. And so that was the culture we had, and we were moving extremely fast. So one of the things I can tell you is we had no experience, by the way, developing or manufacturing products and putting them in retail and all these things. We were learning it on the fly, and it took us 10 months from decision to having the product launched. 10 months. Hardware product. So we spent a lot of time in China, we spent a lot of time in various locations to deal with the retailers and get them convinced about this. We spent a lot of time figuring out how to do advertising, TV, and all these things, supply chain management and all these things. So 10 months. And I wouldn't say we didn't make mistakes, but we recovered from them really fast. When I went to iRobot, I not me, the Evolution team felt a little bit held back, like, why aren't we moving fast? Dyson is coming with a robotic vacuum cleaning and we need to beat them, and da 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 da, and that was the attitude. And when you grow to a certain size, especially if you're profitable, profitability can mask a lot of issues, and so you start feeling comfortable and sort of leaning back and so on. So my frustration, I guess, was I had seen iRobot from a distance, from outside, that iRobot's success was Roomba, which was launched in 2002, I believe, and the Roomba that was there in the market in 2012 was pretty much the same product. It was much better quality, so they've gone through many iterations of 10 years to improve quality. But what are we doing for the next generation, right? I mean, if Dyson is coming with a vision-based navigation solution, why are we ahead of them? We are the leaders in the market and so on. So I'll tell you, the bottom line of it was the culture there was very top-down, like what they call waterfall. Let's do planning. It would take a year to do planning of a product. And then, of course, we know from robotics, plans are not that great, because as soon as you take your first step, you recognize, oh, shoot, that obstacle is right now in front of me, now I have to plan to go around it. The same thing happens for running and operating a company. We were much more agile, like learn fast, fail fast, learn, adjust, and move on. Because you spend a year planning, and as soon as you take your first step, you realize, oh, all of my assumptions were wrong, so let's spend another year planning. So culture is very important, and team is very important. That was the big contrast for me. And big companies, there are big companies that actually can't maintain that culture. I think Amazon, for instance, is unbelievable in the way they do things. You know, how fast they're moving and so on, because they maintain a culture of innovation and agility. That's important. Now, the second question about having a robot dealing with, let's say, floor care and dealing with people. Short answer: people are a lot more complex. Right? And the field is a lot younger, right? So 2001, when it started off, no one believed we could have a navigation solution for $10. It was mission impossible. I had the most world-renowned professors on my advisory board that told me it's not going to work. We have tried everything. Vision-based navigation will not work. We did it, right? So you could say in human-robot interaction, we are probably in the same field, more or less. And dealing with people, interacting with people is a lot more complex in many ways than interacting with floors. But there are also a lot of parallels. I think that there are, now that we have solved it, and as many times is the case for AI or robotics, as soon as we solve it, we say, oh yeah, it's just that algorithm, right? It's not AI, it's just a min-max algorithm, or it's just a A-star algorithm. We are in the same realm now with navigation solved, but human-robot interaction is not.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the questions, guys.